Hello and welcome to another Restore Health Talk. My name's Ann Hackman. I'm a metabolic health coach. I've got my friend and colleague, Dr. Stefania, here with me. And we're jumping on today to talk all things thyroid. So the goal in Restore Health Talks is just to empower women with some easy to understand information about complicated topics. So, thyroid health is something that we get so many questions about. So, we just kind of want to give you guys what you need to move forward and better understand your thyroid health. So, we're going to talk about what the thyroid gland is, what it does, the hormones it produces, how it impacts you when it's not functioning well, and how you can use lifestyle choices to improve your thyroid health. So, Steph, take it away. Let's just start with what's the thyroid gland?
hmm Yeah, great idea. The thyroid gland sits in the neck. It has two main lobes, and if you Google it, you will often hear it referred to as a butterfly. So that is the shape with these two lobes, and it's highly influenced by a hormone called TSH, which stands for thyroid stimulating hormone, and it's a hormone that's secreted by a gland in the brain called the anterior pituitary. And so the way that there's a beautiful feedback mechanism that works here, and we've got a part of the brain called the hypothalamus that's actually monitoring your blood for low levels or sufficient levels, let's say, of thyroid hormone. And so it tells the anterior pituitary to actually release thyroid stimulating hormone when we need the thyroid to make more thyroid hormones. So we've got these three communication components in this feedback loop. We've got the hypothalamus, part of the brain, the anterior pituitary gland in the brain, as well as the thyroid gland itself in the neck.
Okay, so when I bring it down into this, like my simple brain terms, I go, okay, it's a feedback loop. So it's a messaging system where it's all connected, and our brain reads the information, tells our gland what to do, and it's a loop like that.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
loop, exactly. And yeah, the thyroid basically in response to this feedback loop will produce what we actually see and can measure in the blood, which is the metabolically active thyroid hormones T3 and T4. So people might be familiar with some of these thyroid hormone names because they
Mhm.
might have seen them on their lab reports.
Okay, so we've got the thyroid stimulating hormone, right?
hmm hmm
TSH, and
hmm
then we've got T3 and T4.
hmm
So tell me about just how our thyroid impacts our metabolism. This is mind-blowing information to me. So
hmm
I would love our listeners to get a better understanding of how the thyroid impacts just metabolism in general across the board on all of our systems.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And thinking about the metabolism as a system can sometimes be a bit, confusing because when we think of metabolism, we often think about the metabolism in the body in terms of, how much fat mass do I have, how much muscle mass do I have, but and the thyroid gland, of course, produces hormones, and there's the associated pathways related to these hormones that regulate, let's say, the use of energy
Mhm.
inside every cell in our body. So, of course, it is also playing a role in how much fat we have and how much muscle we have because it is regulating um, metabolism in terms of the use of the energy and the food that we eat. But actually, more specifically, we can see it impacting a variety of functions. So day-to-day stuff like thinking.
Mhm.
Muscle contraction, body temperature, the rate at which the speed at which food moves through our digestive tract. Like there's a whole bunch of day-to-day functions that are impacted by thyroid hormone.
Mm.
Yeah.
I find that so interesting. I think because we pinpoint it to weight so often, right?
hmm
We don't think about the metabolism and the energy use for other systems like breathing, or like you
Yeah.
said, thinking, or
Mhm.
yeah, so super powerful information to better understand. All right, you go right back at it, girl. I'm keep interrupting you. Sorry.
No, 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 you're you're okay. So I think like just to make this a little more concrete, sometimes an example can be really helpful. So the thyroid hormone, as I mentioned, controls the way muscles contract, and you mentioned breathing. So I did want to touch on that. So including respiratory muscles.
Mhm.
So, low thyroid hormone production actually leads to weakened respiratory muscles, and so
Mhm.
people will experience decreased lung function, and all of a sudden, people with low thyroid or hypothyroid disease, they might actually feel fatigue and shortness of breath with
Mhm.
exercise in particular, even like a decreased capacity to exercise. And so you can already see sometimes these symptoms that we know to be associated with low thyroid function, how it could be connected to something like muscle contraction, which we now know thyroid hormone in part regulates.
Right.
So it is, and that's only one mechanism by which we see low thyroid function impacting our overall health.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So talk about what happens when our thyroid hormone levels are not in a good space.
Uh-huh. So um, there's a number of reasons why that might happen. So, we kind of mentioned this feedback loop. And so we have a system in place where if our brain is perceiving that there's low thyroid hormones in the blood, then it's going to send a signal to the anterior pituitary to say, hey, we actually need you to send a signal to the thyroid to make more thyroid hormone because we're detecting low levels here and we don't want the metabolism to be too low. We need to increase metabolism. And so, of course, nutrition is key. I do want to highlight that because the thyroid requires certain amounts of iodine in the diet and tyrosine to produce these hormones. And then we actually need certain minerals like zinc and selenium,
Mhm.
iron to help convert the let's say less active form, which is the T4, into the more active form T3, which is going to have that metabolic impact that we want.
Okay.
So that's just from a nutritional perspective. So if we don't have, either we're not taking in those nutrients or we're not absorbing them very well, then that's going to lead to problems. So even if that feedback loop is working perfectly, we're still going to have, we just don't have the, let's say, raw materials that we need to produce those hormones.
So that's where I kind of see that chronic dieting, chronically
Mhm.
cutting calories, or even like overeating, right?
Yeah.
Anything that poses that stress on the metabolism puts
Mhm.
us in a posture where it's just not functioning as well as it can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I would say that that would be one of, let's say, the four main reasons that
Mhm.
we might run into problems. The other one would be an autoimmune process.
Okay.
So that could impact the thyroid gland and certainly its hormones. And essentially, that's the immune system just attacking the thyroid, and it causes a lot of inflammation. Of course, we can also have tumors or growths. They could be on the thyroid or even on the pituitary gland, and they can be benign. They can be cancerous. So we've got tumors that could impact function as well. And then there's this fourth reason, which I do see as being the more common one that we'll run into or see, which is a physiological need. The body perceives this need to decrease metabolism.
Mm.
And typically that's due to diet and lifestyle, and more often than not, a lot of stress. So
Mhm.
high levels of cortisol, and or insufficient sleep.
Mm.
That's a really big one. So we've got, so those are the four main categories, but I would say the first three that I mentioned, so not enough iodine, an autoimmune process, or tumors, those require and are best managed or treated by conventional methods, medications, surgery,
Mhm.
um, that sort of supplementation if we're talking about iodine. But the fourth is more compensatory in nature. So it's, or as we would say, more functional in nature. And really the metabolism has just down regulated itself, and we need to figure out why. And so we need to look at our, take a really good look at our diet and our lifestyle and figure out, why is it that our metabolism wants to decrease the rate at which we use energy? Is it trying to conserve energy, and why? It becomes a bit of a detective process.
Absolutely. So let's just make sure we outline symptoms, right? We talked about it could
Yeah.
be that you are short of breath with exercise or feeling fatigued or tired. Let's kind
Yeah.
of go over some of the really kind of like a comprehensive list of the symptoms of that you might experience if your thyroid is not functioning properly. And then let's get into those lifestyle impactors that we actually have control over.
Yeah. I would say that there is a lot, because metabolism touches all cells in the body, there is a large list of symptoms.
Yeah.
But the ones that we see most commonly impacting people with low thyroid function, it's going to be fatigue, low energy, low mood, difficulty losing weight, or weight gain, and really lethargy, and hair loss tends to be another one, but doesn't show up in all people, and changes in skin quality as well. But again, not everybody, but and also impacts on the digestive system. So people might report constipation, for example, because we know it impacts the rate at which thyroid hormone plays a role in regulating how quickly food moves through our digestive system. So if we look at how thyroid impacts all these different systems in our body, the list becomes quite huge in terms of symptoms, and maybe not specific enough. But if you have this cluster of main symptoms, fatigue, low energy, low mood, issues with weight, lethargy, and maybe some hair and skin changes, it's a really good indication that something's going on with your thyroid.
So super key. Before we jump into ways that we can attend to this, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect. Many of my clients will go to their doc and have some blood work done and come back with a thyroid that shows in a normal range. And they'll get like a green thumbs up, yet they still feel a lot of these symptoms. So before we go any further, can you just help our listeners understand how to ask for a little deeper dive on that blood work so that they can get more information? I just see that a lot. I see women in a normal range according to their doctor, but there's more going on there.
Yeah. And typically when you go see the doctor, and let's say you're not looking for any thyroid related dysfunction, then your doc will typically run a screening TSH. So that thyroid stimulating hormone will be run as a typical screen on a maybe yearly blood report. And if that's normal, then typically that's the end of the road. So they're not going to go ahead and explore that any further because the screen came back okay. However, there are many times where TSH levels will be within that range, but not within an optimal range. And the range is quite large. So a lot of people fall into it unless they have overt thyroid disease. And especially if we're talking about that fourth reason, that physiological need to decrease metabolism, you might not see that TSH out of range, but you're experiencing the symptoms of it, and it's not within an optimal range. And if you dug a little deeper and checked T3, T4, you might actually see that those hormones are not in their optimal range and not in an optimal ratio to each other, but not always. And so we could be catching by looking at the symptoms and maybe digging a little bit deeper with checking thyroid hormones, T3, T4. We might be able to catch something before it progresses and becomes worse. And so that range is there for a reason. We need some sort of range, but people who don't feel well and who have an issue with their thyroid might still be in that range. And so I think it's worthwhile to talk to your doctor if you don't feel well and you're experiencing these symptoms, and you suspect it might be your thyroid. Then it's worthwhile to ask for more testing, and then from that point, if nothing comes up, it doesn't mean it's the end of the road, because you can still get really good results by supporting some of the things we're about to talk about in terms of just regulating the let's say the function of the thyroid gland and its hormones from a diet and lifestyle perspective.
Yeah.
And you might actually retest, let's say in 6 months, and see that thyroid hormone is now actually still in that range, but it's actually more within an optimal range.
Mm-hmm.
And you might feel better. And so I think the most, we don't want to treat labs. We want to take the labs into consideration within the context of how someone's feeling. And so if you're feeling better and your thyroid hormone is in a different place, then you're kind of getting a sense for what your optimal thyroid hormone range is, because it's going to be different for everybody. So
Absolutely.
I might feel really good at a TSH of 1.5, and somebody else it might be a 2.5.
So what's the ask when we go to the doctor? What's the ask for additional testing? We would like them to break out and test T3 and T4.
Free, typically free T and free T3 and free T4.
Okay.
With a TSH, that
Okay.
combination would
Perfect.
be really great to see at the same time.
Perfect.
So if you have a good relationship with your doc and you explain, this is how I'm feeling, maybe you have a history of thyroid disease in the family, and that's worthwhile bringing up.
Mm-hmm.
And then asking to get those things tested just to see if that could be playing a role. I think that's a fair ask.
Right. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times we just don't even know what to ask for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is
Mm-hmm.
where, as women, we want to be able to just be empowered and take control of and manage our health and ask, that next layer of questions. Okay, so let's say we realize that our thyroid health is not optimal, and we want to really hone in on the things we actually have control over. Let's just say we're not at a point where we need a medication or a medical intervention or a surgery, but our number one layer of defense is to jump into our lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through, let's unpack just all the things that can improve our thyroid health. Yeah,
because diet and lifestyle factors have a huge impact on our thyroid function. And really, there's, if we go back to that fourth reason of this sort of need to decrease, metabolism as a whole, it's, I think the next natural question would be, what are the reasons that your body might actually choose to do that? Like, why would my body want to shift my metabolism? And so there's a few reasons why that might be. One could be your body perceives that you're in a state of famine. So you're taking in too little calories. Mm-hmm. So of course, at that point, it's like, how do I conserve resources? I'm not taking in enough. And so I'm going to decrease output. I'm going to decrease how much energy I expend. And so we will feel slower. Our thinking will be slower. Our movements are slower. We don't spontaneously move as much. If we used to fidget, we probably don't fidget anymore. We feel slow and heavy and lethargic. Mm-hmm. And so this is an attempt for the body to conserve energy. And another reason would be if we're exerting ourselves, let's say above and beyond, or overexerting ourselves would probably be a better term, to a point where it's even damaging, let's say. So I'm thinking about people who might overexercise in the context of also undereating.
Yes,
for
absolutely.
A long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
We can tolerate these things in short periods of time, but if we're doing this all of the time, then our body's going to, it's a stressor to the metabolism. And our metabolism is really constantly scanning for stress and reacting to it, and our body is trying to adapt to it to keep us safe, essentially. So these things are these compensations are happening in an effort to keep us alive. Really,
it's so crazy stuff, because it's like kind of the opposite, right? I know so many women who are listening to this can relate, and I hear them when they come to me for health coaching say, gosh, I'm eating really good. I'm not overeating. As a matter of fact, I'm being really strict and I'm exercising every day, and I just can't seem to feel better. And it's literally a process of partnering with them and helping them learn how to nourish themselves more,
Mhm.
to eat more nutrient dense food, to
Mhm.
actually provide their body the calories that it needs to perform all of its functions. And that takes a little while, for the body to trust them again once they
Mhm.
start working on nourishing themselves. And then all of a sudden, the brain fog's gone.
Mhm.
The belly fat around the middle starts to go away. Like it's all this byproduct of just nourishing our body the way it needs to be nourished.
Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yep, exactly. Restoring our health um, by really trying to understand, and this is what I really love about the talks that you're offering is that you're trying to break down these systems and trying to get to that, at its root level. What is it trying to do for us?
Mhm,
Because when we understand that, then we understand how to shape our diet and lifestyle to support those systems in our body, not to work against them. We want to work with our hormones
mhm,
and we want to support our thyroid function. And we don't know that under eating and over exercising is impacting our thyroid in a way that it's adapting to conserve energy for our good, but we actually respond by even, let's say restricting even more. And then,
mhm.
we think we need to work out even more. And so we actually are working against it because we don't understand what's happening um, at a physiological level, which is what you're breaking down here, which is, I think, really empowering.
Exciting, because there are things that we can do something about, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's where health coaching comes in too. A lot of times, we know that there are some lifestyle changes we need to make, but there's a disconnect between thinking about it and knowing that we want to
Mhm.
do it and doing it, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's a whole nother talk.
Mhm.
But I think that's where you and I come in and help people break down these choices and create systems in their lifestyle
Mhm.
that work to just help them gradually build up into nourishing their body in a way that
Mhm.
brings their metabolism to balance.
Yeah.
Tell me more
Mhm.
about other factors. I feel like sleep definitely is an impactor.
Mhm. Mhm.
What else?
Yeah. Well, I would say that, when we, take a step back and look at that compensatory hypothyroidism, or um, sometimes called subclinical because labs aren't picking it up, that,
Mhm,
though that typically comes up in people who are chronically overworked
mhm,
physically, mentally, while also lacking some of those adequate resources around nutrition, food, nutrients, um, and just overextending themselves.
mhm,
So that involves not sleeping very well, whether it's not
mhm,
sleeping enough
mhm,
or not getting good quality sleep. And also when we're in this very stressed state, our digestive capacity goes down as well.
mhm.
So we also aren't, and that's just by nature of the nervous system. If we're in a state of rest and relaxation, we're going to be in a better position to absorb our nutrients from our foods. If we're chronically stressed, we activate a different part of the nervous system, which is not interested in
Yeah,
digestion at all.
right.
And so we already are in a state where if we're stressed and we've got a lot of our mind, so we're not sleeping really well, we're also not digesting our nutrients very well, then from a hormonal perspective, we're not, we're also impacting thyroid hormones because of cortisol and the impact of cortisol there, as well as not giving the thyroid the let's say essential nutrients and minerals that it needs to produce these hormones. So we're impacting the communication system with other hormones via stress, and we're not giving it the let's say the nutrients it needs to produce those hormones because of the impact on our digestive system. And so it ends up where I'm going with all this is it's a vicious cycle where it's
Mm,
kind of like a domino effect,
mhm.
and a lot of it just stems from stress, but the trickle down effects of stress are numerous and it really impacts every person on a different level. So for someone, it might impact their sleep more, which will impact their thyroid hormone via cortisol and
Mhm.
other hormones and their pathways. Maybe testosterone and other sex hormones will also be impacted, which will also impact energy levels, especially if you have low T as a male. Um, so there's just a lot of trickle down effects from stress and being overworked and not giving yourself the time or the space to really take some time to de-stress and to buffer some of that off of the metabolism.
When you kind of explain just how it's all so tied together, like I get super excited about that, right? Like I'm guessing maybe for listeners, they're like, whoa, there's a lot going on in our body. But here's the thing, right? If we just know just enough about how it's all connected, then I feel like then we can understand the importance of really simple, basic choices like nutrition, stress relief, stress reduction. I think we definitely don't give that the weight or the value that it holds. A lot of times I'll have clients just experiment every week with trying to implement a small stress relieving practice. Like, I think it's something we all have to explore. Stress relief is not something that is just kind of part of our day-to-day life, but in women that I'm coaching, I see a huge impact once they start attending to stress. It's amazing. So we talked about nutrition, mitigating stress, coming up with some actual like things in your life that bring you joy, that give you that feeling, right? That attacks that stress response. What else? What else can we do?
Well, I would say if you've got the foundation covered like that, then you can start looking at, okay, so what else in my diet is potentially impacting the my overall gut health, because really the connection between gut health and thyroid and thyroid function is quite strong. So we want to be looking at alcohol consumption, processed foods, things that might really impair or compromise the lining of the gut. So, leaky gut comes to mind, which is a funny term, but really it's just when we consume foods, drugs, alcohol, things that really compromise the integrity of the gut lining. And so we end up causing allergies and other food sensitivities. So that can also impact thyroid function. And then I want to use the word toxic burden, but I know that's sort of a controversial topic, but there are a lot of toxicants that we're exposed to, some that we're in control of and some that we aren't. And when those get into our bloodstream, they also can impact metabolism. And so I do think it actually can prevent the metabolism from operating optimally, let's say. And so we want to be cognizant of the things that we're putting in our body, the things that we use in our home to clean with. There's, and the Environmental Working Group is a great resource for looking at some products that we commonly use and trying to find maybe healthier alternatives to those things, so we just can lower that toxic burden to our overall system, because it can make a difference, at least at a cellular level. It's not maybe the first thing I would jump to if someone isn't sleeping well, but I would certainly explore it.
Sure.
And it is an important one that is affecting metabolism. Of course, if you're injured or you have a chronic illness, maybe an underlying stealth infection, like some sort of underlying infection that has been lingering in the background for a long time, you might want to look at how do I resolve that? Because certainly injury and illness is going to result in your body wanting to conserve resources as well.
Right.
I think that's some of the big ones.
So I I kind of boil it down to this idea. Number one, understand where those hormones are. Go to our doctor, make sure that, we're getting labs. What do you recommend? Once, twice a year? Once?
It really depends. As a screen, once a year. And then if this is something that you're monitoring and tracking, excuse me.
That's okay.
Then it might be every 3 months or 6 months.
Okay. So, and then if we are falling in the normal range, yet we still feel a lot of the symptoms we talked about, exhaustion, brain fog, feeling slow and heavy and lethargic, ask our docs for a deeper dive to give us some lab work for the free T3 and free T4 and work with someone that can evaluate that for you and look at the ratio, right? Because we want to have the right ratio of the more metabolically active piece of that. And then looking at lifestyle choices, how powerful our nutrition, healthy nutrient dense nutrition, enough calories can impact our thyroid health, and looking at stress relief and sleeping well. And then I love that you brought up, is there something else we're ignoring? Is there some low-lying infection? We all have little things going on with our health that we kind of just leave at bay. Checking that out as well. So does that sound like good plan?
That's a very good comprehensive overview. Yes.
Awesome. Anything else that you want to share with our listeners about thyroid health?
I would say that first and foremost, we give you permission to rest and relax.
Yes.
Because I do think that's part of the problem, is that, we live in a society that rewards doing a lot, and this idea of I'll sleep when I die. Although I do think that's changing, that that people are becoming more aware and conscious of overworking ourselves. But I do think it's still pervasive, it's still ingrained in us. And so I do think it's important that we remind people that we need to rest and we need to find ways to decompress, because we can't fully understand and comprehend and see the downstream effects of stress on all of these different body systems. But we certainly can feel it. So don't ignore your body's cues or clues. Biofeedback is another word that we'll sometimes use. Do not ignore those signs and symptoms, even if your lab work is normal.
Amen. Amen. Listen to our bodies, ladies. All right, Steph, thanks for hopping on today and talking all things thyroid. Can't wait to see you again. If you're listening to the video and you have questions, make sure that you reach out to us via Instagram. Steph, what's your handle on Instagram?
Dr. Stefania.
Okay. And I am Ann Hackman on Instagram. All right, guys, take care. Stay healthy. Have a good one.
Bye.
Okay. Better?